I was standing at the edge of his life, watching him laugh. It had been 3 years since I buried an empty coffin in a quiet cemetery. 3 years since the police ruled his boat accident a tragedy. They called it grief. I called it a lie. Because right there in a church 800 miles away was my dead husband, Mark. He was wearing a new suit, holding a baby boy, a son I never had, and smiling at a woman who wasn't me. I wasn't mourning a loss. I was plotting a takedown. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was financial destruction. I was about to walk into that christening and ruin the new life he stole from me. But let's go back to the hollow center of our seemingly perfect life, the one Mark meticulously crafted and then carelessly burned down. Picture this, a sprawling house in the suburbs, the kind with a manicured lawn and a 3-car garage. On paper, we were the American dream. We had the big house, the 2 perfect little girls, Lily, 7, and Mia, 5, and the illusion of financial security. But if you looked closely, the paint was peeling and the foundation was rotten. And underneath all the granite countertops and stainless steel appliances was a mountain of debt so colossal it could crush us. Mark was a charmer, a risk-taker. He had that infectious optimism that made people, including me, hand over their trust and eventually their money. His ventures, as he called them, were always one big deal away from hitting the jackpot, except that jackpot never came. Instead, the bills piled up. The phone calls from the bank became more frequent. The whispers of foreclosure started haunting my sleep. I remember the smell of fresh linen from the dry cleaner when he came home late, trying to mask the scent of desperation that clung to him. I tried to talk to him. I begged him to be honest, to file for bankruptcy, to let us rebuild. But Mark's ego was bigger than our debt. He couldn't be seen as a failure. "I've got this, Sarah," he'd snap. "Stop worrying.
I have contacts. I have a plan." That plan was what kept me up at night. He started maxing out credit cards we didn't even know existed. He took out massive life insurance policies, naming me as the sole beneficiary, almost casually, like he was buying groceries. I remember pushing back hard on the insurance. "Mark, we can barely afford the mortgage. Why are you spending thousands on premiums?" He just smiled that sickeningly confident smile. "It's an investment, honey. Peace of mind. Think of the girls." The irony of him mentioning peace of mind now is just nauseating. The night before the boat accident, I use air quotes because I refuse to call it that now, was a symphony of chaos. The air in our beautiful suburban home was thick with failure. A collection agency had just called, threatening legal action. We were sitting in the kitchen. I was doing the girls' homework with them, trying to keep a semblance of normal. Mark came home late, smelling faintly of gasoline and cheap whiskey. He looked haggard, his charm completely gone. "Mark, we've lost everything," I remember yelling, my voice cracking. "The bank is taking the house. We have to tell the girls we're moving. We have to face this." I didn't cry. I was too furious. I was beyond tears. He was pacing, running his hand through his hair. "No, we haven't lost it. Stop being so dramatic." His eyes were wild. That's when he dropped the line that chills me even now. He looked me straight in the eye, utterly devoid of warmth, and said, "I wish I could just disappear. I wish this whole life would just cease to exist and I could start over clean." It wasn't a lament. It was a cold, hard declaration. And I, in my blind rage and exhaustion, only made things worse. I grabbed a glass of water and threw it against the wall, not at him, but near him. The sound of the glass shattering was deafening. I screamed, "Then go! Just go and deal with the consequences of your own mess." I didn't know he was being literal. I didn't know I had just handed him the justification he needed. The next morning, he was gone. No note, just his car missing and a vague text about an early client meeting down by the lake. By lunchtime, the news broke. His small fishing boat was found drifting, overturned near the coast. A frantic search began. Then came the police, the interviews, the compassionate but firm declaration. Mark's body was lost at sea. They handed me his wallet, waterlogged and smelling of salt. I was instantly a widow. Suddenly, all those life insurance policies, the ones he'd maxed out 6 months earlier, were payable. It was a windfall big enough to clear the debt and give us a small, fresh start. But it felt dirty. It felt too easy. The police, the insurance company, everyone believed the narrative of a tragic accident. They didn't see the desperation I saw the night before. They didn't know the depth of the lies. The debt was so horrific, the scenario of him taking his own life seemed plausible, but it was just plausible enough to be ruled an accident instead of suicide, which would have voided the policy. That was his genius, his ultimate cruelty. He didn't just escape the debt, he funded his new life with my grief. I didn't know it then, but I was about to spend the next 3 years mourning a loss that never happened, while he was busy collecting sun hats and buying beachfront property. For 3 years, I wore the mask of the grieving widow. I was polite at parent-teacher conferences. I smiled faintly at the grocery store. I managed the mountain of guilt and debt Mark left behind, one grueling hour at a time. The insurance money cleared the major debts, but not the memory of his betrayal. I worked 3 jobs. I sold his boat, his tools, even the diamond earrings he'd given me on our 10th anniversary. Every physical object he touched had to go. I was erasing him, brick by painful brick, trying to rebuild a life that felt like a cheap imitation of the one he stole. Then came the Tuesday that shattered everything. It was a mundane afternoon. My 7-year-old Lily was curled up on the couch, watching a local news feature on her iPad. It was some feel-good piece about community heroes in Orlando, Florida, a place I'd never even visited. I was in the kitchen, half listening to the reporter gushing about a successful real estate agent who volunteered at a local animal shelter. I wasn't paying attention until Lily's small, shaking voice cut through the air. "Mommy," she whispered, her face pale, the iPad almost slipping from her hands. "That man, he looks like Daddy." The blood drained from my face. I walked over, my legs feeling like lead, and looked down at the screen. My heart didn't just drop, it ceased to beat. There he was, thinner, with a different, perfectly trimmed beard. His hair was lighter, maybe dyed, but the eyes, those unmistakable, slightly slanted blue eyes that had once promised me forever, were staring right out of the screen. He was laughing, a casual, relaxed laugh I hadn't seen in years. The name under the chyron read, David Miller, local realtor and philanthropist. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard clarity that was terrifying. The grief vanished, replaced by a pure, primal fury. This wasn't a hallucination. This wasn't a strange coincidence. This was Mark, enjoying a new, debt-free life he bought with my tears and Lily's lost father. I grabbed the iPad and paused the video. I zoomed in. His left hand, the one with the distinctive scar from a childhood accident, was resting on the shoulder of a blonde woman, and in his arms he held a baby boy, maybe 6 months old. A son I never gave him. That night I became a different person. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I spent 12 hours on the computer. I traced the news report back to the local station. I pulled every public record I could find on David Miller. Everything was clean. Too clean. New driver's license, new social security number, all meticulously built to be untraceable. But no criminal can erase every digital footprint. Mark was smart, but he was also arrogant. I needed a specialist. I found a brilliant but quiet young digital forensic expert named Ben. He worked out of a cramped office and charged an exorbitant hourly rate, but he was the best. I pushed my last savings across his desk. "I don't want him arrested yet," I told Ben. "I want proof. I want the history. I want the paper trail that connects Mark Stone, the dead debtor, to David Miller, the suburban dad." Ben worked for weeks. He found the subtle cracks. The P.O. box. Mark had used a temporary anonymous P.O. box in a small town near Orlando 6 months before his supposed death to receive mail for his new identity. The luxury purchase. 2 weeks after the insurance payout, a custom-made, incredibly expensive dive watch was purchased online, shipped to a fake name at a drop-off point near Orlando. Ben cross-referenced the serial number with the watch Mark always wanted. It matched. Dead men don't buy $15,000 watches. The offshore account, the most damning evidence. Mark's life insurance payout was deposited into my joint account.
I had used it to pay the bills and keep my head above water. But Ben found a series of complex transfers, small amounts, almost invisible, that moved from my account
Through 3 shell corporations, and finally settled into a private offshore account registered in the Bahamas. The money he had left me was just a smokescreen. The bulk of the payout, the real money for his new life, was laundered right under my nose. Every piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of my past self. I wasn't just mad, I was obsessed. I knew his new routine, I knew his coffee order, I knew the name of his new partner, Sarah. Sarah was wealthy, came from old money, and clearly had no idea she was sleeping with a dead man. She was the perfect mark for a charismatic liar looking for a fresh start. He hadn't just faked his death, he had traded up. He replaced me, my daughters, and our shared history with a cleaner, richer, simpler life. My mission wasn't about the police anymore. It wasn't about the money. It was about justice, delivered with surgical precision. I had to expose him not just as a criminal, but as the coward he was, and make him lose the one thing he had fought so hard to create, that perfect, fake family. I used the news report to find out where David Miller spent his free time. I saw a flyer for a baptism at a prestigious local church mentioning the Miller family. The date was set. My final scene was locked in place. I had the means, I had the motive, and now I had the perfect stage. The moment I had the date, the christening of David Miller's son, the mission became surgical. I wasn't Sarah, the grieving widow, anymore. I was an executioner of justice. I didn't want the money. I had paid the debt and rebuilt my life from the ground up. I wanted him to lose what he cherished most, his flawless, fabricated reputation, and the new family he used as a shield. Calling the police was too quiet. It would be a bureaucratic process, an arrest warrant, a mugshot. My revenge had to be public, immediate, and utterly devastating to his new foundation. I realized the church was the perfect stage. It was a place of purity, of vows, of public declaration. Everything Mark's new life pretended to be. Sarah's family were pillars of that community. Her father was a church elder. Destroying Mark there would not just ruin him, it would expose the deceit to everyone who mattered in David Miller's world. I had 3 objectives for the climax. 1, the shock of recognition. 2, the irrefutable evidence. And 3, the perfect escape. My key player was Ben, the digital expert. I laid out the plan. I need you to hack into the church's digital system. They use a large projector for sermons and hymns, right? I need 3 images uploaded, scheduled to override the presentation cue precisely at the moment the priest asks for the child's name, right before the blessing. Ben hesitated. That's hacking, Sarah. That's a felony. I looked him dead in the eye. My dead husband committed massive insurance fraud and abandoned his children. I'm choosing my felony. I need this done. I'll pay you double. Ben agreed. He understood the scale of the betrayal. The visuals had to be simple, impactful, and impossible to deny. We crafted them meticulously. Strike 1, the vows. A high-resolution photo of Mark and me on our wedding day, laughing in our formal attire, with the date clearly visible on the bottom corner. The message? He was already taken. He made sacred vows. Strike 2, the deception. His official, notarized death certificate issued 3 years prior with his full legal name, Mark Stone, bolded in red. Next to it, a small caption. A life insurance policy was paid out upon receipt of this document. The message? He is literally, legally dead. This man is a ghost. Strike 3, the motive. A screenshot of the final transaction from Ben's forensic investigation, the large, round amount of the insurance payout moving into the offshore account in the Bahamas. No context needed. The money told the story. The message? This was all for profit. He engineered his disappearance. Then set up a timed remote trigger disguised within a common system update file, designed to execute the image sequence and then instantly delete itself from the church server. We tested it 10 times in his office. It was flawless. I spent the weeks leading up to the christening preparing myself. I had to be strong enough to face him, to see his new woman, to withstand the inevitable panic and fury he would direct at me. I needed to look powerful, not pitiful. I bought a dress, not for mourning, but for war. A sharp, elegant black dress that signaled authority. I rehearsed the moment in my mind, the moment his eyes met mine. I knew he would try to deny it, to charm his way out, but the images would be the silent, screaming testimony. The most agonizing part was how to protect my daughters. I told Lily and Mia that Mark was traveling for work, trying to make things right for us. It was another necessary lie. On the day of the event, I arranged for my mother to take them on a special weekend trip, far away, insulated from the coming explosion. This was my battle alone. I wasn't doing this for my children to watch. I was doing this so they could finally have a mother free from the shame and the lies. The morning of the christening, I drove the 800 miles to Orlando. I rented a cheap hotel room and studied the church layout, the rear exit, the aisle length, the placement of the projector screen. I confirmed with Ben. The file was loaded, the timer was set for 11:15 a.m., the peak of the ceremony. I felt an eerie calm. The Sarah that had existed 3 years ago, fragile, heartbroken, in debt, was gone. In her place was a woman forged by fire, ready to deliver a cold, hard truth. Before leaving the hotel, I made one final crucial move. I made 2 phone calls. The first was to the lead detective on Mark's missing person case back home, the one who had always seemed skeptical about the accidental death. I told him I had new, undeniable proof of insurance fraud and a conspiracy to deceive. The second call was to a local Orlando newspaper's investigative team, giving them an anonymous tip about a huge local scandal about to break at St. Jude's Church. My revenge needed witnesses. It needed to be viral. It needed to be inescapable. I was not just exposing Mark. I was ensuring that the police, the media, and his entire new community would hold him accountable. The stage was set. The clock was ticking. All that was left was to walk in and watch the final act unfold. The Church of St. Jude was bathed in a false glow of piety and wealth. It was all white roses, soft satin ribbons, and the hushed, polite murmur of the entitled. I was standing at the threshold, taking one last, deep breath. The scent of lilies and expensive perfume felt suffocatingly sweet. I put on the only black dress I still owned, a sharp, tailored sheath, and walked in. I wasn't wearing funeral attire. I was wearing a uniform of war. The ceremony was in full swing. Mark, or David Miller, was at the front, standing next to Sarah, beaming like the perfect, proud father. He looked happy, truly sickeningly happy. That look of unburdened contentment was the final spark I needed. It was a testament to his sheer cruelty. He had bought that happiness with my suffering. I took a seat in the back pew, near the exit, where the shadows were deep. He didn't see me right away. He was too consumed by his grand performance. I watched him hug Sarah, pat the baby's blanket. I saw Sarah's mother, an imperious woman dripping in diamonds, watching them with beaming approval. I gave them 2 minutes of their false bliss. Then I caught his eye. He was turning his head, glancing back at the congregation, probably checking to see if his big client had arrived. And then he froze. His gaze swept past me, then snapped back. The color drained from his face so rapidly, he looked like a statue carved from ice. His smile dissolved instantly into an expression of pure primal fear, the kind of fear that realizes the ground beneath it has just vanished. He knew. He knew I was the ghost who had come back to collect the debt. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I simply held his gaze, a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of my chin conveying everything. I know, and it's over. That moment of shared silence, the 10 feet of space between us, was the first taste of victory. It was brutal and intoxicating. He looked down, gripped the baptismal font, and began to sweat, trying desperately to regain his composure. The priest, oblivious to the silent terror unfolding, began the final blessing. "We welcome this child, a gift from God, into his community," he droned, standing directly beneath the massive projection screen that normally displayed hymn lyrics. Mark kept glancing at me, his eyes pleading, his face silently screaming, "Don't, please don't." But it was too late. I had already pressed the button on the small, disguised remote I held in my lap, the signal to Ben to execute the file.
At exactly 11:15 a.m., the sanctuary lights flickered violently, plunging the front of the church into a brief, blinding darkness. The congregation murmured, annoyed, and then the projector roared to life, overriding the standby screen. Strike one, hit. The image filled the screen, Mark and me on our wedding day. We looked so young, so in love. The date was right there, June 12, 2012. A collective gasp rippled through the church. Sarah gasped, a high, strangled sound, grabbing his arm. "David, what is this?" Mark finally moved, a sudden, panicked lunge toward the screen, stumbling over a flower arrangement. This was the most damaging blow. His official death certificate was displayed, large and clear. Mark Stone, date of death, October 5, 2022. Below it, the caption, life insurance policy payout, $3.5 million. The air was sucked out of the room. People screamed. Sarah's mother collapsed dramatically into a pew, her diamonds glinting as she fell. Mark was yelling now, a desperate, animalistic roar. "It's fake! It's a trick! She's crazy!" He was trying to rip the power cord from the projector. A simple screenshot of the offshore bank transfer. The large sum moving from the insurance company, laundered through several stops and landing in a private account registered to a fake company. Motive. The noise in the church was deafening. Crying, shouting, utter confusion. Sarah wasn't screaming. She was staring at the screen, then at Mark, her face a mask of absolute horror and realization. You are dead?" she whispered, the raw agony in her voice cutting through the noise. She dropped the baby into the arms of a nearby bridesmaid, staggering backward. Mark finally managed to yank the power cord, plunging the screen into darkness. But the truth was already burned into everyone's memory. He turned, his eyes zeroing in on me. Pure hatred mixed with desperation. He started running down the aisle. "You ruined me! I'll kill you!" he shrieked, no longer the charming realtor, but a cornered animal. I didn't flinch. As he ran toward me, the detective I had contacted, Detective Reynolds, walked in through the main door, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. They hadn't been quick enough to stop the confrontation, but they were right on time for the apprehension. They didn't need me to point him out. The man screaming and charging down the aisle was clearly the one they needed. Mark was tackled just 5 feet from my pew. The heavy thud of his body hitting the marble floor echoed through the stunned silence. He was fighting, screaming my name, but the police efficiently cuffed him. As they hauled him past me, his eyes met mine one last time. They were filled with tears of rage and self-pity. "You'll pay for this, Sarah. You'll regret this." I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm and clear, cutting through his hysteria. "I paid for your funeral, Mark. Now you pay for the fraud." I stood up. I didn't spare a glance for Sarah, who was sobbing uncontrollably, being held by her frantic parents. My mission was complete. I walked out the back door, past the bewildered ushers, into the crisp Florida air. I called Detective Reynolds' cell phone, which I had memorized. "It's done," I said, my voice steady. "You have your confession, your witnesses, and your fraudster. And I have my life back." The chaos and screams fading behind me felt like the most beautiful sound in the world.
Mark was arrested a week later. The charges were massive. I didn't get the money from his fake life, but I got something better, my dignity, my story, and the knowledge that sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to expose the knife that caused it. Never underestimate a woman's rage, especially when you use her grief as a shield.